Good morning on this bright and cheery sunny day. Welcome to Trinity United Methodist Church. My name is Dan Purnell. I'm the lay leader of our church. Tony Brown, our pastor, has been on vacation for the last couple of weeks, and Susan stepped in last week, and I have the opportunity to say a few words this morning. So nobody can leave. You're all sitting in your seats. And I would like to, first of all, ask if there's anybody here that's new to our church, would like to introduce themselves.
Good morning. We have a dear friend from Portland visiting us today. Her name is Joy Brandt. She does a lot of outreach to a lot of people. She speaks Spanish, and she's done outreach in Latin American countries. And she has a prison ministry.
Anybody else?
These people are visiting.
Yes, I think it's their second time. Marvin and Caroline are visiting this morning. Welcome.
Dad, I just wanted to say something quickly. I just don't want anyone to trip on the yellow tape back here. We were hoping, Matt and I, this morning that we would have the new hearing aid booster system set up, but unfortunately there's a little bit of an electrical issue that Matt's working through. So we were hoping it would be ready this morning for our first test. It's a lovely thing given to us by Marsh. And it's here? It's here. The loop is here. He was hoping we'd have our first run this morning. It's a nice surprise, but I'm afraid it's not quite ready this morning yet. But I just want to make sure nobody trips. This is just a temporary installation that the trustees did to try it out. And I'm afraid it's not quite ready. So sorry. But please don't trip on the cord today.
I'm sorry, I missed that, Susan. And this morning, anybody have announcements about activities this week that would like to say anything? Harvey?
This is an announcement not particularly or particular to the church, but the Rocks and the Pros yesterday went to the Thing concert, and for those of you who probably have your issues with contemporary music, I certainly can understand that, but I can report to all of you that it was a great event, terrific music. In fact, even between the music sets of the modern Icelandic rock bands, they were playing old favorites all the way back from Bing Crosby to James Taylor, and we had a good time. Where's Bill?
A lot of families and kids there.
Oh yeah.
Way more kids than I've seen many things around.
So we're all looking for great new positive things that are injected into Port Townsend, and I can report that this was one of them.
Thanks, Harvey.
As everybody, I'm sure knows that we are Reconciling Church now. Our church has joined the Reconciling Ministry, but in addition, we can join as individuals. So I would encourage those who are interested to please join as an individual Reconciling Ministry. And you can do that online.
How do we do that?
You can go to the Reconciling Ministry website, and unfortunately, I forgot the sign-up sheets, but you can also, I have forms that I will have
Online, Google it or something.
next Sunday, sorry.
Thank you, Shirley. And I will make one last announcement regarding Candlelight Concert, which is this Thursday. It is a group called Toot Sweet. It's a quartet of clarinets. They do a wonderful program. The theme this year is Latin American song. That's at 7 p.m. on Thursday. And I don't see many children this morning, so I think what we will do is pause and reflect upon the reasons we are here, and thank God for this day.
Good morning. Good morning. Would you stand and join me
the call to worship. We gather together.
Reminded of our human frailty, which causes us to stumble.
We gather together.
To reflect upon the people in our midst and in the world suffering from their pain and addiction.
We gather together.
To all be set free through Jesus Christ, our Savior, who makes all things new. Amen.
The opening hymn is entitled Just As I Am. It's in the Blue Book, page 357. Introduce yourself to somebody in our congregation this morning, and we'll resume in about a minute. please rise for the congregational prayer. God, we confess our lack of power. We sometimes feel helpless, alone, and weak. We realize that we know only a little, and each time we try to do everything on our own, we fail. We need your power. We want to rely on you daily to guide us to do the things that are necessary for our life. We want your power to be ours, so that we can stand strong in your world. We need to be reassured that death to our old ways need not be feared, and that true life is found in you. Amen. The next hymn is in the Black Book, number 2158, Just a Closer Walk with Thee.
And to simplify it, instead of singing the refrain after every verse, let's just sing verses 1, 2, 3, and then the refrain.
Please be seated. Welcome to our Addiction Sunday. Each year we dedicate one Sunday to discuss addiction topics and how it affects each of us, our families, and the community. And our theme this year is centered around community services that do help the addict. And you'll notice in your bulletin, Lynn has done a wonderful job. This came from one of the resources I know in town about recovery resource services on the front and the back. And take this home. You never know when you will need to dial that number. The scripture this morning from Proverbs is believed to be the longest passage found in all of the Bible. which addresses alcoholism, and addiction. The cycle, well known to alcoholics, is described. The description includes the following words or depictions: anguish, sorrow, fighting, complaining, bruises, bloodshot eyes, hallucinations, and numbness to pain. And of course, all of this is followed up by the desire to have another drink. Our scripture, Proverbs 23, 29 through 35. The insanity of the first drink. Who has anguish? Who has sorrow? Who is always fighting? Who is always complaining? Who has unnecessary bruises? And who has bloodshot eyes? Is it the one who spends long hours in the tavern trying new drinks? Don't let the sparkle and the smooth taste of wine deceive you, for in the end it bites like a poisonous snake. It stings like a viper. You will see hallucinations and you will say crazy things. You will stagger like a sailor tossed at sea, clinging to a swaying mast. And you will say, they hit me, but I didn't feel it. I didn't even know it when they beat me up. When will I wake up so I can have another drink? This is the word of God to the people of God. As many of you know in this congregation, I am a recovering alcoholic. And I am active weekly in local AA 12-step meetings. Most people in this AA arena know me by my introduction in those meetings. My name is Dan, and I'm an alcoholic. These meetings, plus the support of my fellow AA members, along with the support staff of recovery organizations within our community, have continued to help me through my last 11 years of sobriety. Without this infrastructure, I could very easily have succumbed to what the scripture states, the insanity of that first drink. For countless years, this is how I started my day. Just as the scripture's final words stated, when will I wake up so I can have another drink? I simply couldn't quit drinking. However, with the love and support of my wife, Donna, and including my entire family through an intervention supported by local Port Townsend community agencies, I was finally able to overcome my addiction. My family endured my addiction until it became unbearable, and then they sought professional help. Unfortunately, one of those individuals that was to speak this morning, Brian Richardson, can't be here. Brian is with the Dove House and the new Recovery Cafe, and he became ill later this past week. So I will try to give you a real life story about my recovery and the community services that have helped me. Today's message actually comes from one of the resources that I use in some of my AA meetings. It's entitled AA Bible Meditations. It contains 22 devotions on the 12 steps of Christians in recovery. These meditations were designed for Christian alcoholics in recovery. Each meditation is set forth in a Bible passage, followed by a discussion of Alcoholics Anonymous philosophy and or the AA way of life, including AA literature such as the Alcoholics Anonymous book, often referred to as the Big Book. My message this morning and the scripture comes from these meditations and is based upon step 1 of the 12-step program, which states, we admitted we were powerless over alcohol, that our lives had become unmanageable. The insanity of the first drink. This meditation goes on to say, on pages 37 and 38 of the Big Book, which we can find a similar description of the insanity which is demonstrated in the life of an alcoholic trying to quit drinking. They're using a metaphor here. Our behavior is as absurd and incomprehensible with respect to the first drink as that of an individual with a passion, let's say, for jaywalking. He gets a thrill out of skipping in front of fast-moving vehicles. He enjoys himself for a few years in spite of friendly warnings. Up to this point, you would label him as a foolish chap, having queer ideas of what fun is. Luck then deserts him, and he is slightly injured several times in succession. You would expect him, if he were normal, to cut it out. Presently, he is hit again, and this time fractures his skull. Within a week, after leaving the hospital, a fast-moving trolley car breaks his arm. He tells you at this time he's decided to stop jaywalking for good. But in a few weeks, he breaks both legs. On through the years, this conduct continues, accompanied by his continual promises to be careful or to keep off the streets altogether. Finally, he lost his job and can no longer work. His wife gets a divorce, and he is held up to ridicule. He tries every known means to get the jaywalking idea out of his head. He shuts himself up in an asylum, hoping to mend his way. But the day he's released, he races in front of a fire engine, which breaks his back. Is such a man like this crazy? You may think our illustration is too ridiculous, but is it? We alcoholics who have been through the ringer have to admit if we substitute alcoholism for this jaywalking example, would fit us exactly. However intelligent we may have been in other respects, where alcohol has been involved, we have been strangely insane. One of the primary reasons for the solutions found in Alcoholics Anonymous is that we recognize that alcoholism is a disease, which at the top of page, and is described at the top of page 39 of the Big Book, which states, the actual or potential alcoholic, with hardly an exception, will be absolutely unable to stop drinking on the basis of self-knowledge or self-will. And I know that for a fact. Now let me share with you my personal fight with alcohol. Just as the illustration of the person jaywalking above, that was my journey over the years, my disease, alcoholism. And I refer to alcoholism, it can just as easily be drugs, etc. Actually, the majority of people in some of my meetings are drug addicts rather than alcohol disease. I just couldn't face quitting on my own. Oh, I tried. My wife knows that. And just as the Big Book describes in many places of the book, I tried the prescribed remedies. First, I switched to drinking wine only. And then I thought, well, if I drink only when I'm with other people, that will help. And finally, the one that almost every alcoholic tries. Well, I won't drink until 5 p.m. That was the one that finally worked for me. Unfortunately, I made a little modification. I said, I won't drink until after 5 a.m. And that's how I began my day for numerous years. In another effort to quit, I recall that on several occasions, I would wake up in the morning and say to myself, today is the day. I'm quitting alcohol. I would then go to all the locations in our home where I'd hid my stash of bottles, gather them up, and drive to a local park and deposit them in the trash bin. Sometimes several half gallons of liquor. I often wondered myself if somebody less fortunate than me was searching through the trash and found my assortment of bottles. What a find. But for me, after throwing those bottles out, by 6 p.m., I was standing in front of the liquor store buying more alcohol. So you ask, how did I finally stop drinking? Well, it came to me from a gift from my wife, Donna, along with my family and several friends. On Saturday, February 9th, 2008, my brother Bill, who has since passed, Actually, my brother was one of the first family members that approached me about drinking. On one of our annual hunting trips, one day he asked me, "Dan, do you drink every day?" And my answer was quite simple: of course, that's a silly question. On this Saturday, Bill had asked me to join him to visit a client of his on the Olympic Peninsula. Bill was coming over on the ferry from Bellingham. Bill was a geologist by trade and had his own company, often took me on these visits with clients. He performed his services of soils analysis for building sites, logging, etc., anything that had to do with the earth and its possible movement when infrastructure was to be constructed or roads built. However, I would later recognize that this was all a charade to transport me to my intervention. That Saturday morning, he was to pick me up at 8 a.m. to visit his client. I had just poured my second drink of the day when I heard him come up the driveway. So rather than pour good alcohol down the drain, I put the full glass in the refrigerator to consume it later when I returned. No sense in wasting good liquor. When we arrived at his client's office, actually it was the location of Safe Harbor Recovery Center, I was greeted by a big, burly, bald-headed, marine-looking giant, and introduced himself as Ford Kessler, who later has become one of my very good friends. As we walked to his office, I noticed that he secured his arm tightly around my forearm to guide me into his room. At the time, I thought, gee, this is a bit strange. Then it happened. Ford opened the door to his office, and it was like a 2x4 hitting me across the forehead. I actually remember thinking at that moment, thank God they all know. Seated in the room was Donna, and next to her was our oldest son, Doug, then our youngest son, Dan, and his wife, Michelle. Michelle was holding our newest grandchild in her arms, Andrew, who was just barely 2 months old. In addition, two of my longtime friends of over 40 years, Steve Abercrombie from Whidbey Island, and Mike Perry, a colleague from my workplace and a hunting and fishing buddy, were also present. And of course, my brother, who had been the perpetrator in getting me to Ford's office. And to this day, I often wonder if Bill received 30 pieces of silver for his services. Our sons had flown in from North Carolina that day, the day before, and all of the participants in the intervention had met on Friday with Ford Kessler to prepare written statements that later would be read to me the next day about my alcoholism and how it affected them specifically and our family in general. I simply sat and listened for well over an hour about the ways I had disappointed them with my drinking and detailed examples of how I had offended family members, including my grandchildren. It was a long morning for me and my family. To this day, I often reread these testimonies that I keep on my desk at home just to remind me about how much my family and friends really cared and loved me and were willing to take 2 days away from their busy lives and families to help me begin my recovery. Once each of the 7 individuals completed their statements, Ford Kessler then outlined what the next steps were for me to begin my recovery. And this is where some of the support services I'll mention that are listed on the insert come into play. First, I was to immediately be admitted to a detox center in West Seattle for several days for drying out under medical supervision. Then, I would be placed in an inpatient recovery program located just outside of Gig Harbor called Olalla Recovery Center. And that program would last for 4 weeks. When I returned from Olalla, I was to enroll in an intensive outpatient program at Safe Harbor for a period of 3 months of group counseling sessions. Next, I was told I was to attend 90 AA meetings in 90 days, purchase and read an AA big book, establish a relationship with a sponsor that would help me through my early sobriety, and finally begin working the 12 steps of the Alcoholics Anonymous program. What a plethora of support. But my story and insidious desire to drink didn't stop there. As I was escorted out of Ford's office, on my way to the detox center, I can vividly recall exactly what I was thinking at that very moment. How can I get back home and finish that drink that I put in the refrigerator when my brother arrived? That's the insanity of the first drink. Finally, one last observation. The AA program is based upon 3 tenets: recovery, unity, and service. Service is an important factor of the 12-step program. Being able to communicate and interact with the community in some cases that I had wronged in my state of drunkenness, and in an effort to help correct some of those wrongs that were committed while I was drinking. This can be in the terms of AA meetings, making coffee, or helping out with meetings. But for my case, I chose to be of service to our community and Trinity through my commitment to the Candlelight Concert Series. This brings donations not only to help with the restoring of this 148-year-old building, but it also helps with professional organizations in town that service the many residents of Jefferson County. In closing, many of the AA meetings I attend close the meeting with the 9th step promises. To me, these promises state the essence of my recovery program, and they read: if we are painstaking about this phase of our development, we will be amazed before we are halfway through. We are going to know a new freedom and a new happiness. We will not regret the past, nor wish to shut the door on it. We will comprehend the word serenity, and we will know peace. No matter how far down the scale we've gone, we will see how our experience can benefit others. That feeling of uselessness and self-pity will disappear. We will lose interest in selfish things and gain interest in our fellows. Self-seeking will slip away. Our whole attitude and outlook upon life will change. Fear of people and economic insecurity will leave us. We will intuitively know how to handle situations that used to baffle us. We will suddenly realize that God is doing for us what we could not do for ourselves. Are these extravagant promises? We think not. They are being fulfilled among us, sometimes quickly, sometimes slowly, but they will always materialize if we work for them. And within those promises, one sentence that I often repeat in my meetings that means a lot to me is the one that states, we will comprehend the word serenity, and we will know peace. In my case, I know I have. And I thank all of my AA fellows in this town, Trinity, everybody in this congregation for supporting me in my sobriety. Thank you. With that, this morning, our theme was organizations and things in the community that help people of addiction, whether it's drugs or alcohol. And if there's anybody in the congregation this morning that has had a family situation that they would like to share, please feel free to do so. I'll bring a microphone if you would like to do that.
Hi, I'm Kim Clark, I had a lot of it in my life. I myself have not had any issues personally. But my dad was an alcoholic. Back in the old days where his brother was a general practitioner, a doctor, and when he'd get really drunk, my uncle would come up and scold him and make him wrong and tell him, Dad, I need bad, and you shouldn't do this. And then he'd leave, and my dad would look around and he'd sneak off to where he hid the bottle and started drinking, within 10 minutes. And he died quite young, in his 50s. Then I had two sons, they died in their late 30s. I realized when they were quite young, they were having trouble. They were having trouble with drugs. And we tried everything that we could. We had enough money to buy the time of psychiatrists, psychologists, all sorts of people, strange doctor people. Didn't work, and they both spent a year in the adolescent drug treatment program, and it was great, but it didn't have any long-lasting effects. And so my younger son Josh started drinking, quit taking drugs, and started drinking. I've been going to Al-Anon is a cousin of Alcoholics Anonymous. It's a 12-step program, just for families of people who are either addicts or alcoholics or whatever. And Al-Anon is for you, not for your child or loved one. It doesn't attempt to cure them. And I'm not sure that AA does either. I think AA says you got to cure yourself with the help of your higher power, because you sure can't do it. But that's a sophisticated statement I just said. You have to learn it. You can't just by hearing it once, you don't get it. So my son Josh just went downhill, and went back down, and of course it made me feel a little bit better. But then he OD'd and died. And so he's gone. And then his older brother, Damon, was bigger than life. And he was the first kid to ever escape from juvenile hall in Marin County, California, way back when. And he was addicted to opiates early on. And so he ended up in prison, serious prison, like Folsom, and a couple others for like 8 or 9 years. And so he got out, and he was still addicted. I don't know if he was taking any while he was in the lockup or not, but he was addicted and got married, and his wife got him treated, and he was, let's see, I can't tell you, Suboxone is the current medical answer to addiction. And that's not a good answer. Methadone was an answer for a while. We finally figured out that wasn't good. And Suboxone keeps you off of other opiates, which is makes you productive. So that's pretty good. But it still has some sort of an opiate as part of its configuration. So you're still taking some sort of an opiate. And so my son decided to get clean after 10 years of Suboxone. And he had been working like a beaver for 10 years. As a contractor, he owned 10 apartment houses. After 10 years, he was making a lot more money, or saving more money than I did. And so he'd spent like $70,000 on treatment to no avail. He couldn't do it. He was going to 6 days a week he'd go to AA meetings for 10 years. I wish I could say, well, AA did it for me, but it didn't. So the question really is for me, what do I get for myself? And so it's easier, once the boys died, I could go to a grief group that in Jefferson Hospital's hospice program is grief groups. And usually I'm sharing with my people stories about my wife and my husband and I were married for 40, 50, 60 years. And now they're gone and they're just testing. And some I know broken hearts. And so there were some of us had children that we lost. And so they understood entirely what that meant to me. So that was very, very helpful. And I continued to go to Al-Anon meetings because part of the guilt that a parent has is that you didn't do enough for the kid. If only. And so Al-Anon kept kicking me in the butt, saying, that's not true. You didn't do it. You didn't do it. He was the one who took an overdose. And not you, or drank too much. And again, they got in a fight where he was so weak he couldn't raise his arms to defend himself. Which would happen to Josh. So these are bad stories, and I don't want to take any joy out of the drama of these stories. I don't want that. I don't want you to think that that's what I'm doing. I'm just saying there are things out there to take care of yourself. Either Al-Anon or the church or grief groups or something, you can find it. And there are a lot of very, very good people in this world who can help if you will. That's it. So just,
Thank you again.
Come up because I'm short.
All right.
Hi, I'll try to keep this short. That was beautiful, Kim and Dan. Thank you. I'm Sarah Heiner, and as most of you know, I'm also an internist here in Jefferson. My husband Carl and I moved up here a couple years ago so he could retire and do wooden boats, and I could stay working and pay for the boat. But I've also spent 40 years dealing with addiction in all ways, shapes, forms, sizes, flavors, colors, inpatient, outpatient, in Chicago, San Francisco, Las Vegas, and now here in Port Townsend. And I am the ex-wife of both an alcoholic and drug user who is a physician, who lost our marriage, almost lost his son and almost lost his career through the throes of addiction. So I come at it from both a personal and a professional standpoint. I want to say that the strength to stand up and tell your stories and how these things affect family is an incredible act of courage on both your parts, because so many people cannot do that, either the addicts or their families. And as we all know who have dealt with this, addiction in any form is a community and family event. A positive thing I'd like to say coming up here to Port Townsend, and to support what you brought out, Dan, and thank you for bringing that brochure out, and those of you who are active in the community, please, please share the stories you learn and the information that Dan gives you whenever you can, because Port Townsend, Port Angeles, and Sequim are under siege from addiction. And what prompted me to speak today is I was flipping through, as I tend to do, the letters of the editor and the PDN and the leader, about the new, what's called MAT treatment facility that the Jamestown Slalom Tribe are proposing to build. We should be on our knees thanking that wonderful tribe for the work they're doing. Because what they're proposing to do is what we desperately need. These people are in our community, bringing a treatment facility that would incorporate so much professional help to those of us who cannot possibly provide much manpower to deal with it is absolutely critical. Most addicts are not drug addicts being drawn up here because they think they're going to get an easy ride, as Kim pointed out. They are desperately in need of help, and their families desperately need our help. And as a community, never underestimate the cost of what these addicted people behind the wheels of their cars, taking their children to our schools, living in our community of all ages through well into senior citizens are costing us in terms of public health dollars, public safety dollars, and general education funds. So when you read in the paper that the MAT clinic, MAT by the way stands for medication assisted treatment, which is what Kim was alluding to. In this case specifically, it's being used for methadone, but there are drugs also, as you know, Dan, to treat alcoholism, to help alcoholics with their craving, and they have some success because some people need help. They don't have the strength to do it on their own. So when you read in the paper that the MAT treatment facility is going to bring alcoholics or drug addicts to our area, to our beautiful area, they're wrong. They're here. They could be right here in this congregation, and they need our help. The doctors in Port Angeles and Sequim and Port Townsend, we can't handle it. There's so many of them and so few of us. So support the Jamestown Slalom Tribe, support Safe Harbor, support all these organizations, support anything that helps people with addiction, because it is awful. And I hate to say it, but being a child of the 70s and child of the 60s, some of our worst addicts right now are senior citizens. And many of them are hurting and in pain. And there are ways to help them through MAT treatment deal with some of their pain using buprenorphine or Suboxone. But it requires professional help, it requires lots of follow-up. So the treatment facility, let it be. Let it go up. Let this community, let this church be verbal advocates of it, because it is the right thing to do. Not just for Sequim, not just for Port Angeles, but for this town. And thank you, Dan, and thank you, Kim. That was really great. Thanks for listening.
Thanks, Sarah. Anybody else? John?
Thank you, Dan. I'm John. I'm an alcoholic and drug addict. So how many of you, when I said that, had an image of somebody laying in the gutter, totally spaced out? I bet you at least one or two of you had that thought. At least that's sort of the thought I've always had. And it was part of how I rationalized my drinking. Because I'm thinking, I'm not like that guy or that woman. I'm, responsible, professional person. I get to work on time. But I was also using alcohol to self-medicate and to check out of relationships, to check out of really being a human being. And so even though I got great performance reviews at work, I was drunk as often as I could get. And I wasn't one of these guys that would walk into a room all, hey everybody, what's going on? I was kind of quiet and subtle, and I thought, I really handled this pretty well. So I was on a business trip in 1994, which is coming up on 25 years ago, and I remember that particularly well because that's the last time I had a drink, an alcoholic drink, was on a river cruise with a bunch of work colleagues. And as often happened, as soon as you'd sit down for dinner, the first thing that would happen is the wine would start up and all the alcohol and drink orders would come in. And I had this crazy thought, in this, I think what I've heard called a moment of clarity, that I am basically checking out and being a kind of almost like a ghost, because anytime I would see alcohol, I think, how do I get that? How do I get some of that and still look like I'm a normal, okay, non-alcoholic, non-addict person? And I thought to myself, that is, and I'll apologize if any profanity comes out because I'm really saying this totally unfiltered. So I said, that is really fucking crazy. I'm sorry. So I said to my business partner and traveling buddy who I'd been traveling with for weeks, I said, I'm not going to have any wine. He looked at me like I was a Martian, like, what? And I said, no, I'm just not going to have any tonight. So he started really pushing me. And at that point I thought, this is really one of those moments of truth. If I don't stick to my guns here and not take this drink, I'm never going to stop. And so he kept pushing and pushing. And so finally there was one of the guys at the table, and I still keep his business card to this day because it was such a big deal. He said, Gary, I don't think John wants any effing wine. Why don't you leave him alone? I just thought, wow. So that was the last time I had an alcoholic drink. That was November of 1994, as I say, coming up on 25 years ago. But one of the things that went through my mind is, I have a 15-year-old son. And what message am I giving him? Am I going to get a call, sort of like the ones Kim is familiar with, letting me know that my son is OD'd? And I thought, screw that. I don't care what it takes. I'm going to figure out how to be sober. And so I got help. I plugged in with some AA, and as it turns out, I come from a long, distinguished line of alcoholics. My grandfather was an alcoholic and presided over a crazy alcoholic, violent household. My father was an alcoholic. He presided over a very crazy, very violent, unpredictable household. And I thought to myself, okay, I'm seeing a pattern here. What can I do differently? And so it all came to a head one night. My son Jonathan called me at about 2 in the morning, and he said, I need to talk. And he told me, he said, I've watched how you admitted that you had a problem with drinking and drugs, and I feel like you're the only person I can really talk to about this. And I thought, wow, that was pretty huge. And it really showed that my actions or inactions weren't just affecting me, they were affecting in a very, very intimate way my most precious people in my life. So at that moment I thought, thank God all those people were in the right place at the right time to help me get off of this crazy track onto a track of sobriety. And that has enabled me to be a resource to my son, who, no big surprise, struggles with alcohol and drug addiction. And so I guess I'm just immensely grateful for people who have the honesty, emotional, and just moral honesty to kind of say, hey, I'm a drunk, I'm an addict. Not as a way to be self-deprecating, but to say, we really do rely on God. Whatever you want to, you don't have to say G-O-D or whatever, but there is a loving creator that is there to help us. And I think that it's through people's hands who show up at the treatment centers and that volunteer and that donate, that help keep the treatment facilities running, are angels on earth. So anyway, thank you for listening.
Anybody else?
I have the quickest, a really quick one. Morning. I'm Raquel, and today is my first day here at this church. I'm very shy, and I felt really moved to share this. Very quickly, my loved one battles with alcoholism, and I just recently started to go to Al-Anon. So this morning, I was in an Al-Anon meeting that someone suggested to me, and we are new to Port Townsend, and following the Al-Anon meeting, I thought it's going to get out too late for me to be able to make it to church, and I don't know where to go to church here. But God was telling me, go to church anyways. So I got on my phone and I Googled churches in Port Townsend. And I was going to head home, but I came here today, and, I came here United Methodist Church popped up. And I came in through the door and went, oh, I heard everyone talking and thought, oh, it's over. The service is over. And the woman at the front said, no, we're just getting ready to get started. And I sat here, and the first thing said was that this is the Sunday that you speak and have a speaker on addiction. And I just the goodness of God. I just, so.
Amen.
Anybody else? I did forget to mention that during the announcements, this is a potluck Sunday. So please come downstairs. There's no alcohol served. So thank you, and I appreciate your response. And because I'm up here, I can do this. I want to thank my wife. I love her.
Let us pray. God, we give you thanks for this day, for the opportunity to gather in this place to celebrate the miracles of grace and healing through recovery and talk honestly about addictions. We give thanks for the many people who work with alcoholics and addicts. Their service has made relief from the effects of these spiritual diseases possible for so many. We pray that this church, along with community agencies and 12-step programs, can be part of the spiritual solution and freedom from substance abuse and compulsive behaviors. Each one of us has a particular need in this area. Some of us are recovering from addictions or the effects of parental and generational addictions. Some of us struggle with our behaviors or with family members and friends who still suffer. Some of us are interested, concerned, and curious. We care about our family, our congregation, our community, our church, our society. Hear now as we offer prayers of joy and concern for ourselves and others. God, open our hearts and minds to new awareness, new understanding, new action, that we might experience our own healing more deeply and grow in compassion as we serve others in your world. Amen.
Amen.
Please join me in the Lord's Prayer. Our Father,
who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done, on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our trespasses, as we forgive those who trespass against us. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. For thine is the kingdom, and the power, and the glory forever. Amen.
May it go towards God's mission in this world, and all of our future offerings, may they go to his missions also. Bless you all.
So let us now do our closing hymn, Leading on Everlasting Arms, on page 133 of our blue hymn. Generally at the beginning and the end of each of the AA meetings that I attend. So if you would please join me in the prayer of serenity. God, grant me join hands and we will all sing Let There Be Peace.